So please note that Ron Hall is our host and Laura Ordway from Winona Camps is the co-host, and will be overseeing the chat section and saving your questions for the end of this meeting. There is a chat button at the bottom of your screen where you can enter those questions. In order to proceed, could all participants ensure they have typed their name in the participant section? To do this, simply go to the bottom of the screen and you'll see the icon participants. When you open this panel, you can edit your name by hovering over the More button. It will say rename. You could also add your camp name, which would be helpful. At the bottom of this panel, there is also the raise hand option. This will be how we can vote to pass the motions of the minutes and budget reports. So if we can just test that function by clicking on it. Everyone can click on it. I can see the hands raising. And then you can also lower your hand by clicking on it again.
So which icon was that?
It says raise hand at the bottom of the participants panel. So once you click on participants, if you look at the bottom, it will say mute me or raise hand. So you can practice raising your hand and then taking your hand off. Okay. So if everyone takes their hand off now, you'll be lowering your hand. Okay. Thank you. As this is not an in-person meeting, we will not be doing individual introductions in an effort to make it run as smoothly as possible. All participants will be muted by the host or by yourself. So unless you're the designated person to be talking. So please check that you are muted from this point on. Well, we'll be covering many topics today about what happens if camps cannot open at their normal capacity. At this time, Main Summer Camp is supporting camps as we plan to open this summer. The information here, even when delivered by Rebecca, our attorney, is not meant to be formal legal advice. It's meant to help you decide which questions your camp in particular needs to ask your own attorney, insurance broker, accountant, board of directors, etc. At the end of this meeting, after the adjournment of both meetings, there will be a question and answer opportunity facilitated by Laura. Thank you, and over to Peter.
Okay, I just unmuted. It is really heartwarming to see you all. And right when this meeting is over, I'm going to work with my tech people to have a nice picture that I can have as my backdrop for my Zoom. So it isn't just the back wall of my boys' bedroom, which is now the Androscoggin office. This part of the meeting will be very brief. This will be the MYCA part of the meeting. I know in years past in Manchester, when we had things like sales tax, this was always a animated part of the meeting, but we have much more important stuff to address. So this is perfunctory and we're going to get through it very quickly. So I'm not sure, Ron, if the annual meeting minutes from June 12th were attached or not, and if they have to be, but we do need to approve those. So
They were sent out, Peter.
They were sent out. So if I could have a motion from someone, a chat hand raised to approve the minutes.
Mary Ellen did such.
Thank you so much. And a second.
Carol Suddeth seconded.
Wow, this is so impressive. All in favor? Do we need to do a vote or a hand or a raise hand and participant?
Either one.
We're getting so good at this participant thing, so let's raise hand and participant. I guess you got to lower your hand from the last one. Raise your hand. All good.
I'd say we have a majority.
Okay. Because we are very sticklers for being official. Anyone opposed? Okay. I believe that the minutes have now been approved. Thank you very much for that. Steve Suddeth, financial report.
Thank you, Peter. Greetings, friends. This will be brief. The MYCA budget is on track, looking like it should. Congratulations to Ron for running a nice, clean ship. The annual fiscal year ends on June 30. And the important messaging for today for you folks is that back on the MYCA board meeting on February 19th, a motion was passed by the board to take $15,000 of what is a projected excess, again, projected for June 30, take a $15,000 excess and transfer that back to MSC as a donation in an unrestricted donation category. That was unanimously approved by the MYCA board, again, back on February 19th. And it's due diligence that we inform members of that move. Just to give you a little quick history on something like that, that's not something that's required, nor is it something that happens annually. But as both of these associations go through the process of determining the split on the dues for membership dues, we're getting better and better and better at what that split is. And we have over time made sure that we're cautiously positive on the MYCA side because of exactly what we did in February. MYCA has the ability to shift money back to the MSC organization, where MSC would not be able to do that to MYCA. Okay, so that's that, unless there are questions. Thank you. Peter, back to you.
Thank you, Steve. Lots of people to give kudos out to, but certainly both Steve as the treasurer of MYCA and Fritz as the treasurer of MSC, and then Ron, you know, who'd have thunk we would have needed a rainy day funds so readily, but they have been very careful with all of our funds. And just recently, we had the wherewithal to upgrade Zoom so we can do things like this. So you never know when you need such good financial people until you need them. And now we have another example of how both organizations are paying the benefit of that. With that, yet a motion to adjourn so that we can get to the more important stuff. Motion to adjourn the MYCA part of the meeting.
Did someone make a motion? I didn't see it, if they did. Andy did.
I'd be happy.
A second?
Let's see, no? Any second? Oh,
Well,
Jamie Salton.
Okay, thank you so much. All in favor? How about just everyone can go like that? All right, so nice to see you all wave. And I will adjourn this meeting and let Bijit open up the MSC part.
Thank you, Peter. Like Peter, I am also going to keep my introduction brief as we have a lot to discuss on the future agenda here. Some of you may have seen my video that was posted last week, and I would just like us to remember to continue to take some really big, deep breaths throughout this journey, express gratitude for all the things that we do have, focus on what we can do, which is what Maine Summer Camps and MYCA have been doing, and support each other by sharing and reaching out to each other. Every camp is unique, however, COVID-19 is impacting us all, and we need to unite and work together. The Maine Summer Camp Board will be having a special board meeting next Friday, and we'll keep you posted on any new developments. And before we move on, I'd like to give a big thank you to both Ron and Jack for coordinating this effort and putting an extraordinary amount of hours in to support our both entities. And then all the other people who have been on numerous meetings, sharing ideas and insights that will be shared with you on the upcoming agenda. So with that, I would like to, the minutes for the June 12th, 2019 meeting was sent out in the hall monitor over a week ago. And so is there someone that would like to make a motion to approve those minutes? You can type that in the chat. Motion to approve, Mark Lipoff. And then all those in favor, please raise your hand.
Jane Leekman seconded it.
Oh, Jane, thank you. And then all those in favor, thank you. I see a lot of raised hands there. Looks like the majority. You can lower your hand, and anyone opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, I think we look good. The majority definitely were in favor. So I'd like to approve the minutes from our June 12th meeting. And with that, over to you, Fritz, for our financial report.
If I was 15 years old, I would say just what Steve said and then move on to the next thing. But I like to talk too much, so you're going to have to bear with me. We are on track as of today, but like everybody else, we're starting to anticipate loss of income. We haven't actually really dug into that yet, but I just want people to know that we're properly funded and well-funded for the foreseeable future. About a year ago, maybe 9 months ago, we rebalanced our portfolio of strategic finances that we had in the background, and Ron reported back to me 10 days ago that it isn't as decimated as we would have thought. It kind of goes back to just slightly below where we started when we invested a lot of the money. So I think that that's good news. I think that we're gonna have to adjust our budget as everybody else does based on how the next couple months go out. But looking backwards, we were on track for one of the better years that we've had. So I'm gonna anticipate that we're gonna try to keep that rolling. I'm gonna assume that we're gonna lose some business members, hopefully not any camps. If you don't see the value of this organization, you will in the next hour. And it is a lot of great minds pulling their oars in the same direction, and it's great to be part of. I think the biggest thing to say is that we're well funded. We have money in reserve, and we want to keep pushing the camp agenda forward, in not only in the state but nationally also. Ron, did I miss anything?
No, you're good.
Ron, do I need to make a motion to approve the financials that was sent out?
I believe it does need an approval, yes.
Okay. If we can have a motion, if someone could put in the chat to approve the financials for Maine summer camps. Motion from Matt and Andy.
Matt Hines.
Oh, Matt Pines. And a second from Matt and Kat and Andy. And all those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. See a lot of people raising their hands.
We're good.
Please lower your hands. Okay, great. And the financials for Maine summer camp are approved. Thank you, everyone.
I'll happily mute myself. Thank you.
Over to you now, Ron.
All right, thank you. First of all, I have to say that I wrote a report a couple weeks ago to give, and it's in the wastebasket because so much has happened. I do want to mention, just from the financial end of it, in the last month, we have received Junior Maine Guide got a bequest essentially of about $12,000. Level Ground, which we were funding within the MSC budget, got a gift of $5,500 with a promise of more if we need it for for this year. And then we got the 15,000 from MYCA. So we are looking good. Okay, I'm just going to quickly go down through a bunch of things that are going on. First of all, cancellations and changes. Spring workshop at Allagash, unfortunately, has been canceled. The anxiety, refusal, and neurotypical and neurodiverse campers and staff has been postponed. The CIE webinar was canceled. And as Bijette mentioned, the MSC will have a Zoom meeting on April 10th at 10 o'clock. We've been taking a lot of proactive steps over the last, I'd say, month. We are a member of the Maine Outdoor Brands, and as such, I participated in a Zoom meeting about a month ago with the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development. And they are, I've been told, sort of the key factor in many of the decisions that the governor is making right now. And it was a great call. And it's sort of like a light bulb went off for the commissioner when we were there. And I expressed two things. One is that we want camps to be open. We want kids to be able to experience camp after what they're going through this spring. And then secondly, the economic impact of camps not opening is in excess of $200 million to the state and to businesses. So that it was good to get that out there. I know that the commissioner talked with the governor's task force about us after that meeting. And then we also have been in direct contact with the Maine Hospitality Association, which is hotels and restaurants throughout the state. And they first approached me and said they heard a rumor that camps might not be open this summer, and that would be absolutely devastating to the hospitality industry. I reassured them that no such decision had been made, and our goal is to keep camps open. This week, I contacted him and said that as things move forward, we would really like to have their support in any discussions that they're involved in about the opening of camps, if it's safe to do. And they wholeheartedly support us and are ready to be in the forefront helping us. Yesterday, I had a great conversation with representatives from DHHS. And as we might expect, they are not prepared to make any predictions. And I'm not sure they're actually in the forefront of the decision process right now. Obviously, as time moves on, they will be, but my main reason for contacting them or reasons was one, to make sure we had a good line of communication. And out of that, the director of the HIP program has said, please contact me anytime with any questions. The second was to talk about the consequences if camps can't open. And then I raised the issue of, should camps open, they're going to need to be ready to be flexible in terms of a number of the rules that govern camps. Because if we get the go ahead in late May, then trip leader permits, health forms, water tests are all going to be on a fast track to get done and may not get done by the time a camp opens. And they had not thought about that, and they said they would start thinking about it. Also, one of the people in the meeting, the Zoom meeting, was a gentleman named Robert Long, who is involved with the governor's task force. And he said, as soon as we were off our call, he was going to contact someone in the governor's office. Yesterday, I received a call from the governor's office, and we talked for about 15 minutes. And the first thing she wanted to do is to make sure that we understood that the governor sees summer camps as a critical shareholder in all that is happening, particularly economically and for kids. And we just sort of talked about the different things. I threw out the figure of the $200 million impact. I said that we would really like to be involved, that we have tons of resources, both in terms of facilities and also personnel that are raring to help the state in any way possible. I also mentioned that there are a number of camps that are thinking that mid-May may be the time when they're going to have to make some decisions. There are other camps that are not going that track, but I wanted to get that into their heads. She actually used to work at Camp Kiev, and so she loves camp and she believes about camp. She gave me her phone number, cell phone, email address, and said for us to contact them anytime we have questions. They are very worried about the effects that this shutdown has on children and families. She pointed out that this is a time like this, the divorce rate skyrockets and depression issues greatly increase. And one of the things they're wrestling with is, will there be a time where there could be a transition in terms of families doing stuff with their kids during the summer if we're still in a partial shutdown? She also reiterated that right now, any kid that comes into the state or any person that comes into the state has to be self-isolating for 2 weeks. So great conversation, and I think great connection. And you know, well, as I said, we talked for about 15 minutes, and she was very excited. She said that she really began to think about all of the opportunities that camps might provide for the state of Maine. And she was even talking about the state renting out facilities and programs to help. So the next thing is today we'll be contacting ACA National to see how we can support their efforts in Washington. Right now they have 3 lobbyists working on the PPP loan program. They're also working on the small business loan, and we will be offering our support in any way we can. We have also reached out to Newell Auger, who is our lobbyist. It works at Pierce Atwood, and Newell, through his office, we're hoping to get connections to the offices of all of our representatives in Washington. And one of the things that I've been trying to collect information on is what you all are doing right now to help, whether it's donating medical supplies to rescue units, or you're doing food programs. And the more information I have about that, the more I have the opportunity to share it with the state, how camps really are helping to make a difference in this very difficult time. So please, if you're doing stuff, let me know. Email probably is the easiest. And finally, I just want to say that I will continue with hall monitors on a weekly basis for now, but there is so much information coming out, I would have to do hall monitors daily to get everything out to you in a timely fashion. So we have created a new section on our website, which is COVID-19 resources under camp members, and we are posting tons of stuff there. We're posting recorded webinars and so on. So please use that resource. And then finally, I am using Facebook to get really time-sensitive stuff out there. So if you're not using Facebook, I really encourage you to get on our Camp Director's Facebook page. As an example, today there are 2 webinars that are being offered. One is for camps. New Hampshire is actually doing this one. It's for camps that use merchant motors to help negotiate contract settlements for any camps that are using them in terms of what you have to pay. Apparently, merchant has been doing different things for different camps, and they want to try to get that clarified. And then the second one is a webinar with the Commissioner of the Maine Economic and Commerce Department. And I think that's it. I'm done. Back to you, Bridget.
Thank you, Ron. The next business is the Code of Ethics with Jack Erler.
I have to remember to unmute my mic there. Sorry about that. This is would have been an interesting conversation, but for the fact that we have coronavirus right now, which makes this conversation perhaps not very relevant at all. But simply, in the last year, we've taken a look at the Code of Ethics, and we have made some major changes. They are going to be subject to the Board of Directors vote of MSC when that happens, and then they will reach all the members in the fall of this year at the membership meeting. Essentially, we have changed the Code of Ethics to apply only to camp members, not to individual members, that we have rewritten them to bring them up to date, that we have made them aspirational rather than conditional on membership, and that in doing that, we will be required to make a couple of changes in the bylaws during the period of time that I looked at the bylaws. I also looked at them from the standpoint of cleaning them up. There's always things that are can be changed that make them better, and I did that. So what will happen is that the Board of Directors will vote on a new Code of Ethics. That information will come out to all of the members, and then in the fall, the members will adopt bylaws consistent with the changes that I've suggested in them. I think that's all that you need to know unless there are questions.
Okay, I don't see any current questions coming up in the chat, so we'll move on. Now to the crux of what we all want to hear about, and the first is coronavirus efforts, and Peter, if you can take it from here.
Okay, so Bajit and Ron worked on this agenda, and if you've all looked at it, it was very cleverly done, because I'm just supposed to introduce this section and then mute, which I will happily do. Before I do that, however, in addition to everyone on the MYCA board, Jack, Rebecca, and the MSC Executive Committee who are taking care of their family and their business and taking their roles on these boards very seriously, I want to recognize that and thank everyone. You might have heard that every night in New York at 7 o'clock, people kind of open up their windows and scream and holler and clap for the situation and just as a way for community. I think that it might very well muck up if everyone unmuted, but maybe Ron knows how to do that, because we knew what a treasure Ron was before a month ago, but what he has done in the last couple of weeks is nothing short of extraordinary. So if we can figure out how to mute or at least clap along with me, this is for Ron.
Yay, Ron.
Thank you, everybody.
With that, I will pass it on to Jack and we will go through. Before I do that, usually my typical, I looked at the notes. We have had weekly calls for the last 3 weeks. And I look at the call on March 18th, which was actually a regularly scheduled MYCA board meeting. And even the notes from that within 2 days were irrelevant. Within 2 days, because the next day there was an MSC executive committee, we realized that all calls should be a combination of that. And it took us a few days to get our heads around this in terms of what we could do to support the membership. So there were a couple of tangents and it took us a little bit of time, and hopefully you'll see by the following conversation is that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We know you're getting a lot of information. We don't want to duplicate efforts that other camp associations are doing or get information to you that you already have. So we're to this kind of daily web page update of Clearinghouse, and hopefully that has been really effective. Beyond that, we are trying to contact ACA New England. I saw Betty's on the call, not what she expected in her final months as executive director. But we're trying not to recreate, but support, and then focus on what we can do, what we are specially able to do in terms of being in touch with DHHS, the outreach to the governor's efforts, that sort of thing. So it took us a few days to get our stride, but I think we have found it. We will continue to meet weekly. And if there's anything that you think we're missing, which it could very well be, please let us know. With that, I happily mute.
I guess I'm next. Okay, this is Jack Earler speaking. Our governor has been on top of this in a very helpful way from the beginning. She continues to issue executive orders, almost one a day comes out. Fortunately, not all of them are relevant to us, but they make good reading in the sense that they're sometimes a dozen or more pages. And so I just want to review kind of very quickly 2 of them that are affecting camps or do affect camps. On the first one was came out on March 24th, and at that point she limited activities of non-essential businesses and operations. So specifically, she said that any non-essential business was a public-facing business where there was contact with in-person, interpersonal contact, and a site where there were, or a site where there were more than 10 workers, and so that those non-essential businesses, those that were not public-facing and didn't have more than 10 workers, were allowed to continue to operate, provided that they regulated themselves with regard to social distancing, which was, of course, the 6-foot space around each person. So camps in Maine, who had their offices in Maine, although they were non-essential businesses, they could continue to operate because they were not public-facing, and if they provided their work with their offices with the safety for their workers. That continued until, and by the way, just so that specifically said that there were activities that were permitted and those that were not. And those activities which were permitted were use of the phone, use of the email for maintaining the business, maintenance of the physical plant and equipment, managing payroll, that kind of stuff. Then on the 31st, she issued another order, which was a stay-at-home order. Essentially, it said that all persons in the state of Maine were required to stay at home unless they were involved in essential activities. And so that meant that they could not leave their home except for they could go from their home to non-essential businesses, which again are camps or camp offices. Camps are not open now. They could go between their homes and non-essential businesses for minimal operations. Other than that, they were required to stay home. So as it stands now, we're essentially locked down in the sense of movement in the state. Obviously, individuals can go out for essential purposes such as healthcare and getting food and that kind of thing. But from the standpoint of working, they can only work at essentially essential businesses, which camps do not get to, but they can also go to non-essential businesses for minimal operation. So that is the status of the governor's office and the status of the state of Maine with regard to the coronavirus at this time. Thank you. Questions?
I think, Jack, we're going to hold questions until the end. Just going to try and go through this list here. Everyone, I'm Laura from Winona Camps, and I'm going to follow up directly on what Jack was just discussing and translate that a little bit into what does that mean for your employees directly here in the state of Maine. Pretty much, remember that we're trying to give you a summary, and there's going to be questions, as Peter and Brigitte both mentioned. There's going to be direct questions for your camps that we can't cover today. But basically, with the new stay-at-home order for April 2nd, we're going to have this nice PDF of what's an essential business and what's not. And then if you're a non-essential business, what employees in the state of Maine you can legally have on property. So let me quickly break that down. If you are already designated as an essential business in the state of Maine, and several Maine camps are, because you either have bike rentals, you might have livestock and animals that you have to care for. Anything on this list that comes under essential businesses, if part of your camp business comes under that essential category, you do not need to apply for a different waiver to remain open. You may go about those actual activities such as I mentioned, livestock, bike rentals. I think the other big one for camps is many of us have water and wastewater certified people as members of our staff. Those are still all considered essential business operations. You do not need to apply for a separate certification license to be able to have those maintained. Of all the rest of us who want to become an essential operator, you do have to apply for that, and it's through the Maine Department of Economic Community Development. If you want to start being able to host daycare or deliver food, those things, if you weren't currently doing it and you want to start, you do need to make sure that you get a designated designation request okayed by the state. And we have heard of camps doing that and moving forward with that. So again, those are essential businesses. Either you were already designated one or you're working to get designated as one. The great majority of the rest of us come under the non-essential businesses, and under that category, as Jack mentioned, there is a component on page 2, section 1, part 3, that says workers of non-essential businesses and operations may travel between their homes and those non-essential businesses for the purpose of engaging in minimal operations. So if you are having a maintenance person check on the site regularly, or you need office staff, that's what we have to do at Winona. We don't have people staying at home working from their homes. We need our office staff to come in regularly for basic parent communications, paying bills, monitoring the phones, things such as that. As long as those employees have this actual terminology, I work for a non-essential business, but I am engaging in minimal operations, the state has deemed that okay. Couple caveats to this. Remember, Portland's even under stricter guidelines. So some of you in the greater Portland region have slightly different guidelines that you have to follow. Also, if you were planning initially to come back into the state of Maine during the month of April, there is a strong recommendation. It's not part of the order, as Governor Mill said it would be, but she is insisting on a 14-day self-isolation if you are coming from out of the state of Maine. I'm in Bridgeton. We've already had incidents of people being harassed with out-of-state license plates. Cars on the Naples Causeway with out-of-state license plates got egged. You know, there's definitely harassment for out-of-staters with not just with license plates that are showing up at Hannaford supermarkets, but also, you know, I'm born and raised in Bridgeton. There's a general sense of some of the people who I know in town that they are very concerned about what it means when summer camps start bringing in staff and campers possibly to put more of an impact on our local services. So that's not what we're going to talk about today. I'm just saying that that's running in our background here. But today, in terms of if you're moving staff into the state of Maine, you're going to have certain criteria you have to follow. If you're already here and you're trying to keep your offices open, these are the rules that you have to follow by. And we'll follow up on any further clarification questions later on after we adjourn this meeting and go into the Q&A. So right now I'm going to move it over to Ron.
Okay, and I really covered my topic in my report, so let's move it to Fritz. When he unmutes. Fritz?
Yep.
Okay.
I haven't been following the agendas, Ron. So what am I speaking on? And I'll just hit play.
You are talking about when will camps make the final call about summer plans?
So that is the multi-million-dollar question, right?
Yes.
I think that it changes on a daily basis. And I think that the answer, as Peter said earlier on Monday, is different than the answer today. I'm going to assume that by next Friday, it might be a different answer. I think that most people are looking at a mid-May as a big date. People were looking at the end of April. I think obviously because the federal guidance goes until the end of April, that's going to be a big date for us. I think that personally, I think that it's going to be a multi-tiered approach to the date. I think that most people will have to decide and articulate their plan in mid-May to be able to get staff there on time, be able to get kids organized. And I think you're going to have another drop dead date of getting staff there, which will be in the beginning of June. Then you're going to have to look at whether or not you can maintain a healthy staff for that kind of 2-week period. We've contemplated bringing them in a little bit earlier so that we have a little bit extra time. Instead of being a 1 week, it's kind of a 10-day thing. And then you're going to have the drop dead time of, okay, 48 hours of getting on the bus and they're jumping out of the plane. So I think that there's a number of different dates that we're looking at. And all of them are, as I write in almost all my emails to Ron, clear as mud at this point. It is not easy. And I think that camps are getting into trouble saying that by May 20th, we will definitely have a definitive answer of what's going to happen. And we're going to articulate all of our plans on one piece of paper. I think that the camps are getting into trouble using dates and trying to control this thing so it matches our schedule. I think other people are starting to look and starting to talk about later starts and shorter summers. And that is something that I think as we get more into May, that'll be a little bit more of the conversation. But I think right now, I keep coming back to the same conclusion that our phone is not ringing off the hook with people saying, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I need to know. we've had 2 people that have said, can you tell me if camp's going to open? Because if it doesn't, I want to make other plans. And our response has been pretty clear. If we're not opening, there's no other plans for your kids because we're going to be ready to go if anybody is. So it's that's kind of the date thing. I think it's very frustrating having to delay billing and having all that stuff up in the air. But I also think that it's a better thing for your organization not to get too locked into exact dates, because you're going to be in trouble on the other end when the 20th of May or the 15th of May or the 12th of May turns around and you don't have a definitive answer. So is that good enough, Ron?
Yes, that is. And ACA has put out sort of a chart of what to think about in various scenarios. And that is one of the documents that is up on our website under camp members Corona-19 resources. Okay, and so we're on to Rebecca.
Okay, I think I've unmuted. And Jack, feel free to unmute if you want to add anything as I go along. But I was asked to draft up a little memo for you all because everybody's got questions about tuition refunds and what to do with some of the prepayments that you've already gotten from campers and their families. And I'm going to start off with the caveat that Bijette already said, that this is not legal advice for each individual camp. Everybody's camp is going to be different, so it's going to require everybody to look at their own contracts and consult their own attorneys. But I want to just talk about some of the general principles that are going to come into play, because I think camps take for granted so much the relationship that you have with your campers and the families that it's easy to forget that those are actual contracts. So the legal principles of contract apply to those. So the big picture is that all of you, when you accept money from parents, the parents are giving you money in exchange for the camp providing a Maine summer camp experience for 2020 summer. If you're in the position where you cannot provide that camp experience, whether that's a camp personal experience and you guys can't open for a personal reason, or if it's a state mandated shutdown, or it's just not safe because of the coronavirus conditions or whatever the reason, if camp's not opening, then technically the camp is the one that's breaching that agreement with the parents, because the camp's not fulfilling its end of the bargain. The parents paid the money, they're expecting camp, they're not getting camp. So it sort of already puts camps on the back foot here. When I say that everybody has to look at their own individual contracts, some people will have clauses that say that prepayments may not be refundable or by a certain date or any number of different things. You need to have one of those clauses to have any basis for keeping money, because otherwise the default under Maine law is you were supposed to give us X, you didn't give us X, so I want my money back. Same as if you went in for a haircut and didn't get a haircut, you would expect to get your money back. So that's the default rule. Now, of course, this summer is different. This is all unprecedented and nobody expected this to be the world that we were living in right now. So there are a couple legal doctrines out there that can protect camps if you have to make that decision not to open, or if that decision is made for you by a higher authority. One of those is a fancy French word that we use in the law called force majeure, which is a clause that you might see. It might be in your contract with your parents. You might see it in some of your contracts with vendors. Maybe you have it in your employee contracts. It's a clause that basically says if the unexpected happens, if fire or war or floods or tornadoes or any number of acts of God happen and camp cannot open this summer, then this happens, then camp is forgiven. It's sort of to think about something that's outside of either party's control, which obviously the coronavirus is, obviously governmental orders would be outside camp's control. So if you have a force majeure clause, again, you're going to need to look at your contract, see if you have one, and then look at the actual specific language included. Some of them include things like pandemics and governmental orders or orders of civil authority. So that might give you some cover. in order to keep a refund, you might have to say, you know, in the event that camp cannot open due to these circumstances, flood, fire, pandemic, civil authority, then camp has the ability to keep X amount. So you would need to look to see if you had one of those. If you don't have one of those, and I'm guessing probably most camps don't, I think it's something a lot of people don't think about, and that's true just in the general business world. And I will tell you, there's going to be a lot of litigation I would foresee in the coming years, because, you know, businesses all over are going to be fighting over whether these clauses, you know, cover the event that's happened. So we're all going to be learning a lot as we go along. But there's also a doctrine under Maine law called impossibility, where you don't even have to have anything written in your contract. It's just impossible for you to fulfill what you promised. And that would be the case here, I think, for camps. If you cannot open due to the coronavirus or due to a shutdown order, it's just impossible for you to open and provide that camp experience. So if you have that, there's still going to be some things you need to think about as you're wrestling with the idea of, do I refund money? Do I have to refund money? What do I need to think about? One of those things is, even under impossibility, you have to start thinking about whether sort of the damages that you're running up, if you are spending money right now. The questions that are going to be asked are, you know, was it foreseeable that camp will close? And as Fritz was saying, right now, nobody knows whether it's foreseeable. And I think that's going to change as things go on. And that's going to be a moving target, but it's going to come down to, you know, at some point it will become foreseeable that camps won't open. And if and when that happens, then it would be irresponsible for camps to continue spending all kinds of money when they know that they're not going to be opening. So that's something to think about as you're making decisions this spring. Another thing would be whether it's beyond the camp's control. I think most of this will be beyond the camp's control, but there might be circumstances where individual camps make the choice not to open, not because of a shutdown order or because of an immediate threat of coronavirus. So that's going to have to be something you be careful about, because then it might be considered somewhat in your control that you made the choice not to open. Avoidability, that goes back to foreseeability. You know, are you still buying, you know, 100 new jet skis, even though you know that you're not opening camp this summer and you've spent all this money on jet skis? You want to make sure that you're avoiding expending things that you could have avoided with reasonable efforts. So make sure that the things that you're doing this spring are the things that are reasonable to do. I know you have to prepare for the summer, so keep preparing, but keep it reasonable. And then the last thing is notice. You know, are you providing parents notice when you get to the point that you know you're not opening? Providing notice as soon as that becomes available. So I think those are the big things to think about in terms of the legal. And then where it hits the ground practically is, you know, what your options are when you're thinking about refunds and parents' tuition. So first, you know, you have the option of giving a full refund. Some camps might be in the position to do that. You'll also have the option of giving partial refunds. There is sort of an expectation that you do have to spend some of the money that you receive before day one of camp comes. Some of the money that you've already taken in might be spent, and it might be reasonable to have spent that. The rule in Maine is that it has to be proportionate and not excessive. So think about, you know, what that means per camper in terms of what would be proportional. I'm assuming most people spend the majority of their money during the summer months. So it would not be proportionate to withhold everything. And so I think one option that is really not an option, at least under Maine law, unless you want to get challenged, is to keep everything in the event that you don't hold camp. So another option is to credit to next summer. Just in the back of your mind, always be thinking about, you know, is this excessive? Is it reasonable? Am I doing things that are within the bounds of foreseeability as you make those decisions? And I'm going to be around for the question and answer period after, when people have additional questions, I'm sure, on all of this. Anything to add, Jack?
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. I think the thing to keep in mind, obviously, is what she said, which is that you have a contract, and contract is subject to contract law. And in the first instance, what the contract says will be important, but that doesn't stop the courts from making their own interpretation. And we do have a case in the state of Maine in which there was a contract in which it did say that they could withhold all of the money, and that contract was challenged on the basis that it was inappropriate liquidated damages, which again Rebecca referred to. So the kind of overarching premise that I think is the right one to take is that you are merely a step on the ladder. Your suppliers have asked you to give them money, and maybe they don't have a refund clause in their contract. Your parents have given you money, and whatever your contract says, so that your job really seems to me to be working both with your business members and your parents in a way to reach a settled solution, a solution acceptable, rather than to rely merely on your contract. And you also notice that today that there is a kind of emphasis in this coronavirus atmosphere of the individual not suffering damage, the individual wage maker not suffering damage. And so you will have to remember that the court will view what you do through the eyeglasses of the current court. Obviously there may be questions like that.
Yeah, and as Jack said, as you're going through having to make some necessary expenses this spring with some of your vendors, that's another time to also look at your contracts with them and start seeing if they have that force majeure clause, or if you can get one in to say, you know, in the event that I'm not going to need this product, can we come to some agreement as to what happens then? And it's just an idea of sort of spreading the risk and the loss around so that one person's not left holding the bag for everything.
I want to add one more thing, and that is that we are about to send out a letter to our business members. And I just wanted to look at the time, but I think it's going to go out here tomorrow or in the near future to our business members, raising these same issues and asking them to work with us as we will work with them, because I'm sure that will be necessary. Is that right, Ron? The date, the time on that?
I'm hoping it will go out this afternoon. Did you hear that? Hello?
Yes.
I did hear that. That's good.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. Okay. So we're on to Laura again.
All right, thank you. I actually laughed out loud when I saw the agenda and saw payroll options / insurance. So we're going to try and cover a lot of ground here in a very short period of time. Again, just giving you a summary of what's going on. In fact, for the payroll options, I see the questions coming in the chat, which is great. As each of these sections concludes, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. We will try and put like questions together and answer those during the Q&A session. I know that there's a lot of stuff coming up about summer contracts, which is actually not what I'm going to talk about right now. Further down the agenda, we're going to have people talk about the CARES Act and SBA. So we're going to hold off on that just for a minute. But I'm going to talk about payroll questions that Maine Summer Camps has been receiving right now, which is mostly limited to your year-round hourly staff and your year-round salaried staff. So really quickly, remember that your hourly staff are subject to labor laws, and most of the questions that we've been hearing are asking questions between laying off staff and having them be able to sign up for workers' comp versus furloughing staff. These are things you really need to discuss directly with your camp attorney to make sure that, or your camp board, or wherever you are getting the most important financial and labor law advice for your organization, because these are going to be very specific for private camps versus nonprofits and some other agency camps. So remember, we've been hearing a little bit of some camps laying off full-time but hourly employees so that they can qualify for unemployment. We've heard some camps going to furlough, which is, remember, furlough isn't just a reduction of an actual set amount of time. It could be a reduction within the week. You know, you go from a week-long employee, 40 hours a week, to 1 day a week. The thing about furloughing, and again, I am not a labor law attorney, you need to be really careful that when furloughing that you make sure that you're not asking your employees to work when they are technically furloughed. So if someone, for example, and we've heard that you can keep a hourly employee furloughed who lives on property, they can continue some of their benefits, such as on-site housing. But you have to be really careful if you move them down to 1 or 2 days a week on a furlough. You can't have them take out the trash on the day that they're not working. You can't have them reply to emails if they're not working that day. You have to be very clear when you furlough employees about what their actual hours of working are going to be. And again, attorneys will be able to give you very clear guidelines on that about hourly year-round employees. Salaried year-round employees are a bit different because, of course, they are exempt from labor laws, and it's of course, laying off is an option, which many of us are trying to avoid. Furloughing salaried year-round employees gets even trickier because, of course, if you reduce the number of hours, then you might sacrifice their exempt status. So again, have someone really help you with this to delineate the difference between your hourly employees and your salaried employees, and what the best way for saving funds at this difficult time when all of us are struggling with cash flow issues, what the best options for your salary employees are going to be. Again, there are options for furloughing, but it can't be based on hours. It has to be based on pay for salaried employees, because if you start messing with the number of hours, then you're going to have problems with that exemption. All right, and moving on, I know that's a lot, and again, we're going to talk about seasonal summer staff as we move further down the agenda. There's a lot of questions in there about, should we be sending out contracts right now anyway? What should be in them if we are sending those out? And we'll be talking about that a little bit further along. Let me quickly touch on insurance here. This is a big topic. I'm going to put on my happy face. I saw Jimmy Chalmers in here at some point, and he is the insurance expert. I am not, so I'm just going to give what you need to know as a Maine summer camp. Thing number one, you need to know: contact your broker. They are very important in this situation. They will communicate between you and your carrier, and your broker is really, they're becoming your advocate now. You're going to have to negotiate. Most of us are going to have to negotiate some stuff with our carriers, and our brokers are going to be very important to be our advocate at this time. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you're in touch with them, because everyone's insurance is a little different. The three main areas of questions we've received with insurance, and Rebecca's already covered one, but the three main questions we get from at Maine summer camps are: what about the insurance that parents might have bought as travel insurance? What about my own camp's insurance ability to cover refunding tuition? And what about moving forward if I can't open, if we can't open camp this summer, what do I need in terms of insurance moving forward? So a lot of stuff. Break it down really quickly. To refer back to group number one, what about parents who have bought travel insurance to cover tuition that they may have paid to a camp if indeed that camp then closes this summer? It's like an 8-ball, I'm sorry. Outlook not so good. Okay, so there's some talk out there that if they purchase and pay for those coverages before a certain date, before March, They might have some recourse of being able to get their tuition covered, but more likely they'll get their payment back. Right now, some of us have received the email saying, encourage your parents to sign up for this travel insurance to cover them if camp gets canceled. And then a few days later, we got the follow-up email. Don't encourage your parents to sign up for this travel insurance in case camp gets covered. So that is something that we've been hearing. We should not be encouraging our parents at this time to sign up for the coverage right now. That ship has probably sailed. If someone has different information about that, that would be new to us. So that's the travel insurance for parents. Let's talk about if most insurances, group number 2 of questions, if most insurances will cover us for tuition refunds if we cannot open this summer. The short answer, no. Camps cover business interruption coverage is traditionally based on camp opening, having property damage, things such as that, which in this case, we do not qualify. Some camps may have had communicable disease coverage, which is rare for most insurance policies. And even if you had it, it's probably only a coverage of about $50,000, which would not cover most camps' entire refunding of full tuitions. So some people out there may say, but wait, you know, I've heard that the norovirus, which was a former virus that most of us might recognize as the cruise ship virus, that those were covered in the past by my insurance company if there was an outbreak of norovirus at camp. The fine print is that that is from a designated source, that they can determine that started at camp, it impacted you at camp, and that would be covered as business interruption. But the insurance industry is designating COVID-19 as a non-specific source. So you would not be able to say that it started right at your camp and therefore affected you that specifically. So it's unlikely that there's going to be refund of tuition coverage. Having said that, the vast majority of webinars I've been on, everyone has said the same thing. Prepare to file a claim no matter what. Prepare to file a claim, even if right now I'm telling you it's unlikely that tuition will be covered, because there are, right now, in fact, there are 4 northeastern states that have legislation in front of their lawmakers that says that if the federal government in subsequential stimulus packages reimburses insurance agencies, then those insurance agencies need to pay out to their clients. That has a whole nother set of problems. There's not that bill in front of the main house at this time. However, there may be things coming down in the coming months that would allow for certain recouping of premiums or payments that we just can't foresee right now. So file a claim even if it's a no right now. And then the third point, I know I'm moving through these quickly, is what about this summer? What if we can't open? Does that save us a lot of money? Yes, you're going to save some money because your insurance broker is going to work with you in terms of you won't be having to pay coverage for a number of camper days. Your exposure will be less. That's the kind of double-edged good news. If we can't open, you save money. The not so great news is you still have to cover your property, and that's going to be regardless of whether people are there or not, from theft and vandalism and fire and storms. And so that's the time when you really need to talk about your premiums being adjusted, a payment plan, how that your underwriter can work with you during a time when we might be really struggling with cash flow. Okay. And I just wanted a final thing that we've heard repeatedly, and Rebecca said it already, don't go rogue is what insurance companies want you to know. They really don't want their camps that they're covering to be the one camp that opens when everyone else has been told to stay closed. So again, you want to talk directly to your insurance company about that, but the feeling that we've heard generally from many different underwriters is that's not something they're going to be encouraging. I'm going to turn it over to Steve Sudduth.
Thanks, Laura. I'm supposed to provide you with a J1 visa update, and I will try to do so very briefly. I think it's best if you think of it in the terms of, there's an 8-step process to a exchange visitor J1 visa, from application to working at your property in the summer. So if I talk through that 8-step process really quickly, you'll see that there are steps along the way. And the big message that I'm trying to give you today is that you should, in my opinion, go research where you are in the process with each of your potential placed J1s at present. Every individual may be on a different peg on the ladder with these 8 steps. And you can't start deciding and making decisions generically about the whole thing. Take a look at where you are with each individual person. That's the message I'm trying to give you. So there's an application and an interview process. We all know that. That is controlled by the sponsor. It's sponsor dependent. And as we know, most, if not all, have already established deadlines or closures on new applications. Second, they've been placed at your camp, and you've made an agreement with that sponsor and with that exchange visitor. Same message, it's sponsor dependent. I recommend that you really keep track of looking at those email updates that you get from the sponsors that you work with, okay? The third step is the one that is suddenly has come crashing down. That's a visa application at a US embassy, and those are closed, right? And we know that they're closed. It's a temporary closure, and that's the messaging that the State Department is still providing. They're temporary closures with no definitive answer to the date, okay? So where are you in that process? Have you placed somebody with your sponsor, but you don't have a visa yet? It's a different decision-making process for you than the next step, and that is somebody has a visa, but they haven't been able to travel, and they don't have the ability to secure a flight. We know that right now, right? Travel restrictions are May 10 or May 12, depending on which country they're coming from. We know that that date might change, but that's where it is today, okay? Once a travel ban may be lifted for entry into the US, the next step of the process is, can you actually secure a flight on a commercial airline? So just keep that in mind, that I have a feeling the airlines are going to be coming in slowly, not rapidly, back into the economy. That's an editorial comment, and you should take that as a grain of salt, okay? Let's say that all of this is starting to work, and now it's time to actually get off that airplane. Will there be screening entry restrictions that are different than we normally know? To be determined. Watch that space. Once they get through a screening process and they enter the country, if that's the case, are there options and access to domestic travel? Right now, much of the public transit travel system in the country is not running today, right? So again, keep that in mind. And finally, let's say they arrive at your place and they arrive at camp. You can now start to consider what you might consider contingency planning for training and orientation, because there is a component with exchange visitor program that there is orientation prior to access to the kids, okay? So a long 8-step process. And as we know, it's kind of shut down right now. Go research, if you have placed individuals, go research where they are in that line. That's the thought. I can segue into ACA as I'm supposed to here, ACA efforts. I'll start with the same context of J1. If you don't know, it's important for you to know that ACA has direct access to the State Department. It is not through third party. Her name is Sharon Koch. If the State Department has anything to say about J1, ACA gets it directly, okay? And ACA also has a seat at the table for any sponsor organization meetings. When the sponsors get together, which is often now, ACA is present. And it's just another piece of what ACA is up to. That's normal business prior to today's crisis, okay? But it is helpful in today's crisis to have that access. As we roll through what else ACA is doing, I think Ron has already gone through most of this and much of it, but keep in mind, please, from a national perspective, that there are there's really two different lobbying support mechanisms in DC with ACA. One is a tag team of 2 individuals that has been working with ACA for coming on 4 years now. The other is direct access to the Vice President's office in the White House. And that's been in place now for as long as the current administration has been there. That is helpful. It lets ACA government affairs seek knowledge in the lobbying effort from those 2 camps, okay? They are working at present on what's called the 4th bill. The CARES Act was the 3rd. And when I say working on, so is everybody, right? But ACA is trying to do things like expand the triple P so that there's a better interpretation of how you use payroll for seasonal businesses. Or another one is to try to liberalize the rules for how to qualify. Or a bigger one, broader, is there a possibility to try to get the next version to identify an industry that needs relief? Okay, those are some of the concepts that are being tossed around and worked through. I think more globally and more thought-provoking would be that Tom Rosenberg's team is working behind the scenes on a few things that are helpful if you start to think down the road a bit. Number one, there's a group that's putting together the concept of best practices if you are able to open. Okay, that's not published yet, it's not finished yet. It's a moving target, right? But it's being worked on. Another example would be the contingency concepts of what's the playbook look like if you're a camp that just can't operate, right? And is there some guidance that ACA can provide for a general playbook? There are camps with at-risk populations that unfortunately are needing to make the decision to close now rather than wait and determine. At-risk populations are the ones that are needing to make decisions prior to when they want to. I was going to say kudos to Betty Bussell and thank you for, can you imagine? I don't know how many people were involved with a virtual conference last weekend, but that was just absurdly, ridiculously awesome, right? So rather than me go through that and go through what ACA New England might be up to, Betty's on the call, so I'm going to turn it over to her if you don't mind. Thank you.
Well, thanks. There are several people on this call who've been involved in the conference planning. There are people on this call who were speakers for the conference. And I'm happy to say that despite the very quick movement with the help of our volunteers and our staff, we had almost 500 people participate on the 2-day virtual conference. So we were really happy about that. We are in the process of putting all the tape sessions in a place where anybody who registered for the conference will be able to access all of them for a couple of weeks. So more information will be coming out about that as well. Other things in terms of ACA, we have certainly been getting a lot of questions as well. Will camp open? Won't it? When do we have to decide? All those same things. We are also getting a lot of questions about accreditation. And will I have to be visited if I'm scheduled for a visit this summer? What will happen? And we are looking at all of those things. We want to be as helpful and supportive as we can be. And there will be a message coming out from ACA very soon, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, addressing this. So there's more information to come with that. In the meantime, ACA and the 3 affiliates, which are ACA New England, ACA New York, New Jersey, and ACA Illinois, are all working together on the COVID resources. And a matter of fact, instead of all doing our own, we are referring everything to the national page. We are also working on a series of free webinars for people actually all across the country on different topics that everybody can participate on. So that is happening as well. I will say that in New England, we already know of a few camps that have made the decision to close. Some of those have been more probably smaller nonprofit camps that felt that they would not be able to do the fundraising they needed to do in order to run camp this summer. And a couple of others have a big medical component of camp. I'll give you an example of Hole in the Wall. Has decided they cannot operate this summer because they depend on volunteer doctors, nurses. They go through so many medical supplies that they just don't think they'll be able to get them. The other unfortunate thing we're hearing already is that some people have lost their jobs. Not just a furlough, not just a temporary situation, but a few people have lost their jobs already. Our concern particularly is with a lot of the larger social service agencies like Jewish community centers and YMCAs. For those organizations, it is camp and phys ed that bring in most of the money to operate the whole association. So there's certainly concern that if camp doesn't operate, that will have a bigger impact on more people involved at camp at this time. So all I can tell you is, well, I do have one other thing. The CDC is currently working on their rules and suggestions for the summer. They tell us that we should have that information in the spring. Well, it's already spring, so we're just waiting. And so we think that a number of decisions might also be dependent on what their rulings are that they come out with shortly. Finally, probably the most important thing is one, kudos to Maine summer camps. You are always a leader in the country and in New England in particular on getting right onto something and trying to address it and help your members. And Ron has been amazing, as have many of the volunteers for Maine summer camps. In addition, the ACA New England board and staff, while we may not be physically in the office, we are here for each of you as well. You can reach us by phone, you can reach us by email. We are happy to help in any ways that we can. We look at ourselves as partners with you, and whatever we can do to help or support you at this time is what we're going to do. So we are available to you. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Very, very appreciated that you're on the call today with us and sharing the updates from ACA. Let's move on to the CARES Act with Jack Ola, please.
I think that we should start with this premise, and maybe I'm not sure if I can hold this up and you can read it, but let's see if I can get that. No, Goes even backwards, doesn't it? There's two things about the CARES Act and about the federal response, and that is one, the details are not worked out. As a matter of fact, the article I wanted to show you is that the lenders, the people who are going to be involved in managing the money of the CARES Act, are saying essentially to Washington that there's so much not known, such lack of clarity that they're not sure that they can get this program going today, and they're concerned. So a lot of what's going on here is still up in the air. The second thing, as has already been mentioned, is that although CARES has been passed, there are already discussions of amendments to the CARES Act in order to make it one way or the other. And so we are in the kind of watch this space phenomena here with these new laws. So essentially, CARES does 4 things, and 3 of them are important probably to camps, or could be important to camps. First one is an SBA loan called Economic Injury Disaster Loans, EIDL. You'll see those initials around, and you have to be a designated disaster area. Maine has, I think, was one of the first, if not the first state to be that got that designation. The loans are up to $2 million. They're under Section 7B of SBA's disaster loans, and they're designed to alleviate economic injury caused by the disaster. The loans are repayable over a 30-year term. The interest rate is extremely low for such loans, 3.75% for for-profit, 2.75% for nonprofit agencies. There's a kicker here, and that is that by applying to these loans, you are then become eligible for a grant, and that grant is called an Emergency Economic Injury Grant, and it's an advancement of $10,000, which theoretically could come to you within 3 days after you make the application. I'm awaiting to see that happen, and we'll salute it if it does. And these advances do not need to be repaid if you turn down the loan, or if you're declared ineligible for this loan. So that you make the loan, you've made the commitment, you then apply for this, you get that money within 3 days, and then if you're not eligible or you decide not to do it, you get to keep the $10,000. It is a grant. It is not refundable. The second program, which a lot of you are aware of, is called the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program. And it is really designed not for you, but for your employees. Essentially, it says that we want businesses to keep their employees. We don't want them laid off. We don't want them furloughed. We would like to have as many employees kept employed and paid their employment wages as we can, and that's what we will back with the so-called Paycheck Protection Program. It is, as they say, to avoid layoffs and furloughs. Almost all camps are eligible. You have to have 500 or fewer employees. I don't know of any camps, at least in Maine, that have more than 500 employees. The loan can be up to $10 million. It is restricted by not more than $100,000 per employee, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It is supposed to be used for payroll costs, although it can be used for mortgage interest, rent, and utilities expenses incurred before February 15th this year. And although these loans are considered to be 100% non-repayable under certain circumstances, the fact of the matter is that they think so many people will apply that it is likely that only 75% will be forgiven and not 20, and the other 25 won't, and that you ought to not be spending any more than 25% of the loan on mortgage interest, rent, or utilities. 75% ought to go for the principal purpose, which is that it pays money to you, which you have paid out to your employees or will pay out to your employees, as a result of the coronavirus situation. There are just really limited guidelines. If you read all the documents, it's essentially for businesses that operate year-round. There's a lot of scratching their head about how about summer-only businesses, seasonal businesses, how do they work? I have read any number of different ideas about how one determines what pay they are going to lose, which then becomes the number for which they can get this money to pay themselves back because they've paid those out to the employees. And for seasonal employees and seasonal employers, that's been a problem. Those loans, like the first loan, are administered through your bank, through banks that are qualified under the SBA. And so you should turn to your banker to discuss this, and your lawyer to help you interpret it. One of the things, for example, that is mentioned in this loan is that it's repayment. It's repayable if it has to be repaid. It's repayable over 2 years at 5.5%. And Rebecca found some information early this morning, which says that that's wrong. It's now 1%. But hopefully, if you were to borrow here, these would be forgiven, and that would be a moot point. But we don't know. So essentially, the big question here is how do you figure out what you are going to pay or have paid to your employees for which you can claim an amount of money under this loan and as it proceeds. And that's been difficult to understand and is a moving target yet, but working with your bank, hopefully they will know something more about it. The loan is available. This program is available from now until June 30, and then it closes. So that's PPP. And then,
Jack, can I just add one thing to that? There
Yeah.
was some new guidance on this that came out last night.
right, that's right.
My bank sent it to me, and I'll be happy to send those things to Ron as well, so you all can see them if you haven't gotten them already.
No, we have them. Rebecca got them too.
Okay.
I think last night, Rebecca.
Yep, and I sent them to Ron this morning, and that is where the change from 5% interest to 1% interest came in. And they also, relevant to camps, they did change. It looked like in the original act, there were sort of 3 options that camps may have had, and it was questionable, but it seems like in the original act, it looked like you didn't have a choice if you were seasonal. You had to use the formula that they said for seasonal. Then guidance started coming out that says, no, you can sort of elect whether you are seasonal or year round. If you want to use the year round, all your 2019 employees for that formula, or you can opt, and until yesterday, you had a choice whether to use the February 15th 12-week period, or you could choose a March 1 to June 30th period of 2019 to measure. Then this new guidance that just came out that Ron will post probably today has changed that again. So now you're back to 2 choices. Your 2 choices are either all of 2019 as a year-round business, or if you're going to go the seasonal route, the months that matter are February 15th through June 30th, 2019. So that's the period you would use if you were electing as a seasonal.
Okay, and I will just note that this information is already up on our website under the camp members section. And I also need to point out that they have a new version of the application that came out overnight.
Yes.
And if you've already filled the old form out, it's no good. So you have to use the new form. And I also read somewhere that in the first hour, one bank had 10,000 applications. So I think it's going to be a bit of a mess for a while.
Yeah, and it's all first come, first serve. So everybody's being advised to get them in as soon as possible, which is what everyone's doing.
And the other thing that you need to focus on is this is not money in your pocket. This is money designed to reimburse you for wages that you have paid. And so it's not, if you think that this is money in your pocket, it is not. The PPP is essentially designed to protect employees, not the business. It is a way to protect the employees through the business, but that's not the principal purpose of this loan. So it is of value to you to the extent that you need to be reimbursed for money that you paid out to employees or are going to pay out to employees in a situation where you're not going to open or have been affected in a negative way by this situation. The third one of the three programs is a fourth program, which deals with larger businesses, not camps. But the third one essentially says this, that if you have an existing SBA loan, a 7A or a 504 or a micro loan, or you take out a new SBA loan, then and you've taken it out within 6 months of the enactment date of the CARES Act, then the SBA will in fact cover the loan payments and the interest for a period of 6 months. It's called a loan subsidy. So what it is essentially is if you take out the EIDL loan, then you can apply for this grant and get 6 months of repayment on that loan, both interest and principal. That is that one. The state of Maine has an agency called FAME, Finance Authority of Maine. And they also offer 4 programs, 2 of which could be of interest to camps. One is called the COVID-19 Relief Interim SBA Finance Loan Program. And it essentially says that the FAME, the Finance Authority of Maine, will make direct loans up to $100,000 to eligible borrowers who prove that they have a commitment to the SBA loan. In other words, they're waiting for their SBA loan, but it hasn't arrived yet, and that this $100,000 will then be paid in advance of that. And then they claim that this loan could be for as short a period as 48 hours. In other words, it's designed to help somebody who is still waiting for their SBA money but needs money now. They can get that money now. Once the SBA loan comes in, then portions of the SBA loan are used to repay Finance Authority of Maine their loan to the owner, to the small business owner. The other one is called the COVID-19 Relief Business Direct Loan Program. FAME will make a direct loan of up to $50,000 under special terms to Maine-based businesses who experience interruption or hardship due to the coronavirus. So those programs are also available for Maine corporations, Maine businesses here in the state of Maine. I think on that, and the only thing I can tell you is that we have a mind-boggling amount of information on the MSC website about this, and you read it and you think you have it down and you understand it, and then they fool around with it, or somebody's got a different interpretation of it. So you're just going to have to roll with the punches on this. Okay, that's what I have.
Thank you, Jack. Kat, with the Bob Ditter update.
Hello. If your head is spinning, there's good reason. Not a week ago, this agenda was completely different, and we've now been on the line for I don't even know how long, and over an hour, I'm sure, with so much new information. It's kind of an overwhelming and unprecedented time. And one of the things that when we got together as a community in Maine summer camps and MYCA, we realized that we really need some support. This is challenging, it's uncertain, and it's causing anxiety for everyone, including ourselves. So we reached out to Bob Ditter, and he has agreed to do 2 possibly 3 webinars or Zoom meetings for us for Maine summer camps. The first of which will be this coming Tuesday at 1 p.m., April 7th. And this is directly for directors and administrative folks in your organizations to deal with the psychological and emotional challenges that we're facing right now, and to offer practical suggestions and help us manage the stress and stay positive at this time. So that's coming up. We hope you'll join us. Now with our extended Zoom platform, we have the ability to host quite a number of people. So please join us, and welcome your administrative team as well to join us. In addition, he will be doing at least one other webinar in May, which will be more directed at how we can support our staff and our campers. And at this point, we don't know the trajectory of what that webinar is going to look like, but it could either be how do we support our staff and campers, assuming we're all opening, and we can imagine that there's going to be some additional anxiety that we're dealing with amongst both populations this summer. I mean, myself, I know I am feeling anxious even walking into the grocery store right now. So it's going to feel different this summer if we are in session. And if we're not in session, that's a whole other psychological thing that we're going to have to deal with both our campers and our staff. So he is on deck to help us with that, and that could be 1, possibly 2 additional webinars that will be in May. Thank you all. This community is amazing. The people who are doing so much work we can't do this alone. And I've been watching, this is probably the best attended meeting we've had. And that just shows how relevant this organization is and how important it is, especially in such challenging circumstances. So I know from myself, I feel grateful to have this group of peers, and let's stick together. Thanks all.
Thank you, Kat. There was one thing that we also have been actively talking about that was not on the agenda, so Matt Pines, if you would type in.
I'm definitely paying attention. So one of the things that we have been discussing as a small group working on it is a effort to provide a sort of an activity for kids and families, and something that is not another virtual activity, that is not another online thing, but is a real world actually doing something activity, something that is very on brand for Maine summer camps and for Maine as a state, and something that we think might get us some good PR, one of those stories that might get picked up by the media, and maybe just remind people that Maine summer camps are still here. So what we're talking about right now is, as an idea, is something that we're calling the Great Maine Marshmallow Roast. And the Great Maine Marshmallow Roast would be right now tentatively scheduled, and it's a tight timeline, for Memorial Day weekend, for the Saturday night Memorial Day weekend. And it would be a multi-part thing. We have some great ideas for doing an educational piece around it, and having Ron's got some contacts with IF&W, and of course we have a wealth of JMG folks who could do an amazing video tutorial about how to build a safe campfire in your own backyard, so that if we're still quarantined, or if you're not able to access the things that you might want to do, you can still have your own backyard campfire in Maine this summer. And then after that's put out, we would figure out a way to try to distribute marshmallows to kids who might not be able to access them. And we would get hopefully some media coverage, and maybe some well-recognized camp alum or friends of camp from around the state to maybe do some promotional spots and encourage everyone in the state of Maine and really around the world. But, you know, this is definitely aimed at something that we can do for Maine kids. Encourage all of them at the same time to go out into their yard if they have access for that, and we'll have accommodations for if they don't, to go out and roast a marshmallow at the same time under the same sky, and just have that sense of we're doing something communal, we're doing something that's real, we're doing something that's very on point for summer and for Maine, and just maybe even start an annual tradition where Memorial Day weekend, we're kicking off the summer, we're kicking off in style, everyone's getting outside, they're roasting a marshmallow, and it's something that is brought to the state of Maine by Maine Summer Camps.
Great, thank you, Matt.
No worries. We'll give you updates when we have some more on it.
Okay, awesome. And so with that, that is the completing the formal agenda of the Maine Summer Camp meeting. And I'm looking for a motion to adjourn, or do I make a motion to adjourn? I'd like a motion to adjourn. Are you right, Ron? Ron, you're muted. Can you unmute?
Fritz made the motion,
Okay, great.
and Bob Strauss seconded it.
Wonderful. And with that, all in favor? Okay, yes, thank you everyone. And now we're going to be transitioning to, so approved, we are adjourning. We are going to be transitioning with Laura Ordway into the question and answer section. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. We're going to try and follow up with a few questions that we've had going on in the chat here. It seems to break down into a couple big categories. I do want to mention, it's been obvious, but I want to mention this particular call, this meeting has not been focused on anything medical. We are planning to have that offered to members in the next coming weeks when we get some more materials and some experts together. So I'm going to skip over some of the medical questions right now because we really don't have that prepared for you. Although I will tell you that ACA New England in their conference and the Association of Camp Nurses have put some really good information online that you can access if you have questions right now for your facility. So look to those and watch this space for later on, because we will be bringing you, as we get closer and closer to camp, what we need to do for preparation, health and safety wise. Moving on, some of the questions breaks down into two big components: hiring of summer staff, and also some pretty detailed questions about the CARES Act and the PPP versus the small business loans, small SBA loans. So I'm going to turn it back over to Rebecca. I see you right there. So Rebecca, first couple questions to you. Can you clarify a little bit about the non-resident situation that we've got going on in the definition that we've got going on in the group chat, and how camps, what that is that part of the Small Business Association loans or the PPP, and how we're moving forward with that?
Yeah, so the non-resident, it doesn't mean non-resident of Maine. The new interim final rule guidance that came out just says now, and this is something new, they ask, is there anything that is expressly excluded from the definition of payroll costs? And they say yes, excluded from that, which means you can't include this in when you're thinking about what your payroll costs are in that formula under the Act. You exclude any compensation of an employee whose principal place of residence is outside the United States. So if you have international staff that you were factoring into your calculation when you were deciding what to do here, what formula to use, you can't use them in that anymore. And you can't use this to cover their costs. I'm sorry, what was the second question, Laura?
No, that's great. There was also,
Okay.
that covers that question. There's also a question that, although Jack is correct, most of us don't have more than 500 employees. Some of our member camps are part of national organizations like the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. Would they qualify for those loans?
That's a good question, and I don't know that employer is defined. It might be open to interpretation. I think I would encourage those organizations, if they have subsets, to still apply and let the FCA or the lender make the determination. I just wouldn't count on getting those funds, but I don't think it hurts to apply. This act is very frustrating because there are a lot of terms in it that have no definition, such as seasonal employer. So if you're scratching your head and saying, why can't I get any guidance on this? It's because there isn't any. Jack, do you have any other insight into what employer?
Yeah, no, it's not clear. There has been some discussion about whether the 500 or fewer is done on an element, that is to say, like a camp or a camp organization. And so I don't know that I know the answer, and I don't know whether anybody else does, but I guess, again, our advice always would be to apply on the basis that let's see if it works.
Looks like Mary Ellen might have an answer. Mary Ellen, would you like to chime in about that?
Yeah, only just, whoa, wait a sec. I've got a couple things going here. Boop, boop. Sorry.
Oh, we might have lost Mary Ellen for now, but
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, you are? Okay, okay.
Yeah, sorry, that was really funny. Okay, so Girl Scouts anyway are all incorporated independently as nonprofits. So ours is basically a small business in the state of Maine. At least that's the stance that we're taking, or our administration is taking. I don't know about Boy Scouts, but yeah, we're a small business incorporated in the state of Maine.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. Matt Pines is putting some of the most recent information from treasury.gov in the chat there. So be sure to click on that link if you want to go to that website, or make sure you take a screenshot of that so that it's all set for later on. Lots of questions earlier on about seasonal staff, which again is a big topic. We weren't able to address that too directly, so let's try and cover a couple of those. I'm gonna throw this back to Rebecca a little bit for these, about questions about if a camp has not sent out contracts as of yet for their summer seasonal staff, is that a good idea to do now, and what needs to be included in that contract going out now?
Yeah, I think if this is the time of year that you normally would be doing that, we are still all operating under the hope that there's a chance that camp could go forward this summer and you're going to need staff for that. And I think especially given the J-1 visa, you know, if you are going to be relying on domestic staff, you better start getting those agreements out and back. That said, I would suggest that you do add language, if you don't already have it in your agreements, that covers the, you know, in the event that camp can't open for any reason, you know, either, or if camp has to open late, or if whatever the circumstances are that you envision possibly happening, write some language in and give the camp a little bit of discretion in the agreement, so that the employee knows that in the event that you're not holding camp, you're also not going to still be paying this person, you know, for 8 weeks of sitting at home eating bonbons. Like, that's going to be, it's all contingent on camp actually being able to open. And if you already have agreements with people in place, I think it's okay to go back and modify them, reach out. I mean, everybody's hoping camp opens, and I think your employees will understand that as well. And that might also give them some protection under some of these programs, or also unemployment. But it looks like Jack has something to add.
Yeah, remember, Maine is a unique state in the sense that they recognize employment at will. The critical piece of that is the contract has to say that because normally an at-will hire means that I hire Joe on day one without a contract, and that he can quit anytime he wants, and I can throw him out anytime I want. Normally, when you have a contract, that's considered not at will, because a contract runs from day one to day 16 or whatever it is. And so the general law in the state of Maine does not consider that an at-will contract. And all camp employees, seasonal employees, normally have a contract. And so you want to make sure that your contract says in large bold letters, this is an at-will contract, because then you can terminate the employment for any reason. Now, the employee can terminate the employment for any reason as well. And it does make sense to have a clause at the front end of that, which says that if for any reason we can't open or that the program doesn't run, then this contract is null and void. And that language is acceptable to Maine courts and will pass muster under the basis of the at-will employment.
Okay, great. And just to clarify, either Jack or Rebecca, if camps have already sent out contracts and they are not clear at the at-will statement or the force majeure statement, can those contracts be amended now? And if so, which of those two legal terms is more important to put in there?
Well, I would start by saying a contract, until it's signed by both parties, can be amended. Okay. So one of the mistakes clients sometimes make, camp clients sometimes make, is they send their contract out and they've already signed it. In that situation, they don't get a second chance, because once the employee signs it, it's a contract. We would recommend that you always send your contracts out and you sign them last after they get back, not before you send them out, because then they can be amended. So to the extent that they don't exist yet, they certainly can be amended. Rebecca, what was the second question, Laura?
Just of those two terms, at will and force majeure, which one should be in our contracts?
I would add both.
Okay, yeah, I would add both. They do slightly different things, and they're both valuable. The at-will contracts, Rebecca minds a lot, but just so you understand, some camps will say, well, wait a minute, I don't want to hire my head of waterfront as at will, because then he or she can quit anytime we want. The answer to that question often is put your at-will language in the contract and say that each of you will give the other person 2 weeks notice. Now, that means that the employee can't quit until they've given you 2 weeks notice. It does not necessarily mean that you can't get rid of them without a 2-week notice, as long as you're willing to pay them that 2 weeks of wages. So if you had a situation come up where you want to get somebody out of camp right now and they have a 2-week notice period, as long as you pay them during that 2-week period, they're gone out of camp whenever you can. So that's a kind of little piece to that at-will contract.
Yeah.
Okay, and just,
yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
On the question I just see pop up in the chat, if you already have a fully executed employment agreement that both sides have signed, I think given the current state of the world here, it might make sense to reach out to those employees that you already have signed contracts with and say, look, it goes to the same open communication that everyone is having with parents and with their camper families. Like, we are hoping to open camp, but there is a chance that this might not happen. So I'd like to, propose an amended agreement that we can both operate under, and it can work both ways too. You might be able to open and have camp, but that counselor comes from a place where they can't get to you because of wherever they're from. So you want to give them that bit of cover too, that if they can't get there, you're not going to hold them to that contract.
Okay, great. We're gonna do one more question about PPP and then move on. Bobby asks, what if we bring staff on for May 1st and then close June 1st? Is that a layoff nullifying the PPP grant? Rebecca or Jack, you want to take a crack at that?
I'll take Rebecca. I'll take the first crack at that. The answer is that the loan is designed to help the employee, not the employer. And so if you lay off people, that increases the amount you have to pay back. The point of that is that you don't have to pay back that stuff which you have spent yourself to an employee. That PPP is designed to prevent layoffs and to prevent furloughs. Rebecca, do you have something further on that makes sense?
No, I think that's right. You risk losing a piece of that forgivable amount by doing that. But it's pretty clear that this act was not intended to really think about seasonal summer businesses right now. So that's why the timing just seems very odd when you're trying to match up when you guys are hiring versus what this act is protecting. And the act really is meant to cover these couple months right now where people would be laying off. Which really isn't you guys, but because of the June 30th date, you do get swept into it with your seasonal folk.
Okay, thank you. And I think the overlying thing to remember is contact your banker. Every camp's going to have very specific questions about this, and it is just moving every single hour. So talk to your banker. I am going to now circle back to a couple other topics here. There are a couple really straightforward questions about medical that I can answer very quickly before we move on to the next one. One is, would we be liable as a camp if we were to open and someone had developed COVID-19 while at camp? Would we be legally liable? The best advice we've heard at Maine summer camps is if you are to open as a summer camp, if we get the go-ahead, we're going to have a very, very significant list of protocols we need to follow from Maine CDC and the Department of Health and Human Services as our licensing agency. If you are following those policies and procedures and someone still gets sick at your camp, you will not be liable. However, we haven't seen all of those policies and procedures, and some summer camps are going to struggle with the level of cleaning and sanitizing and distancing. So that's a great question. Stay tuned for more. Another one, would we, if we opened and someone got sick, would we have to close for a certain period of time? The answer right now is yes. We don't know about in June what the answer will be, but right now the CDC guidelines are that if you do have an organization that's open and someone gets sick, they're requiring you to close. Basically, it's a little different for each state, but basically for 72 hours for a deep clean and to prepare safety-wise. So again, if that's one of the guidelines moving into summer, that for some residential camps, that would be nearly impossible to abide by. You know, we couldn't have campers coming from all over the country, have someone get sick, and then have to close our doors for 3 days. Those campers wouldn't have places to go. So let's get back to, someone asked, could Jim Chalmers, are you still on? Could you speak about the liability for kids getting sick at camp? We may have just answered that, but do you have anything to add to that?
No, Laura, you did a great job earlier speaking, and then obviously right now as well. I mean, it'll be interesting to see, just in the sense that I do know because of some year-round programming, you know, YMCA's, Boys and Girls Clubs, other youth-serving organizations, there are active claims already submitted on business interruption, and then also with kids being, you know, getting sick while at a place of, you know, I don't want to say daycare facility, but, you know, a program and whatnot. So certainly these will take some time to play out, for lack of a better term in description, but it'll present some more information for us to know and whatnot. But yeah, to your point on protocols, procedures, and what exactly are those pre-screening while at camp, I mean, we're waiting to see and determine those pieces as well. Like we all know, no two claims are the same, so it really depends on that specific situation.
Absolutely. And while we have you, I'm going to take advantage of you being here and ask you, we didn't cover workers' comp. If a staff member were to get COVID-19 during the summer, do we have any idea yet if workers' comp versus the Safe Family Act, what is covering employees who get sick?
Right, so that'd have to be a determination if they got sick. The hard part is, right, determining where and when and how you get sick. in a place of work. An injury is a lot easier, black and white. I got hurt, I was injured while doing a certain job. The challenge is every state is a little different too. Obviously, we're talking to Maine camp directors and owners here, but it really depends on, again, the situation. What we're seeing typically, a sickness is not a compensable claim within workers' compensation, more of an injury. Every state, again, is different in their laws.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And then just finally wrapping up here, I'm looking at some other questions. If I missed your question and it's really crucial, could you copy and paste it again into the bottom of the chat, because I know that there were some higher up that I haven't gotten back to. But again, it seemed like most of the questions were about medical, hiring of seasonal summer staff, and specifically related to the contracts, and several questions about the PPP, which is part of the CARES Act, and the Small Business Association loans. And I think we're wrapping up here, unless anyone, Brigitte, Peter, Ron, specifics that you'd like to cover before we close out here.
No, I think we've been on the call for over 2 hours, and I think that we've covered a lot. And as we said at the beginning, Maine Summer Camp Board will be meeting next week, and we will keep you posted with any updated information.
My final shout out would be to Laura, who was what we usually say at Camp Androscoggin is someone volunteers for a job. Laura volunteered to be co-host, and I think that that was just remarkably well done. So thank her for not only
thank you, Peter.
Wonderful performance.
At Winona, we call it voluntold.
Yeah.
I was voluntold.
So we have recorded this whole meeting, and if you want other staff to see it, or I'll make it available to camps that couldn't participate today. I should have it up hopefully later today, if not tomorrow.
Stay safe, everyone. Until next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.